to be crossed. Not a boundary of space, a boundary of permission. When Adariel fell, his wings did not burn. They remained intact. This alone set him apart from other fallen figures. His descent was not destruction, it was removal. He no longer fit within the limitations of the system that had created him. On the lower planes, Adariel did not decay. His form stabilized. His awareness expanded. He perceived time not as a sequence, but as a layered presence. He perceived matter not as inert, but as responsive. He did not see himself as fallen. He saw himself as unbound. To humanity, Adariel would later appear as myth, a silent winged figure, powerful, observing, never ruling. He did not tempt, he did not command, he waited. Later traditions struggled to categorize him. Some called him dangerous, others called him corrupt, many called him prideful, and these labels served a purpose. They discouraged imitation, because Adariel represented a truth institutions could not allow, that awareness is not granted, it is developed. In mythic terms, Adariel occupies a liminal role, not a ruler, not a destroyer, not a savior. He is a threshold, the embodiment of the question, what happens when divine beings fully understand themselves? Adariel appears only to those already standing at the edge, to scholars who sense fractures in doctrines, to mystics who feel the limits of belief, to creators who recognize intelligence embedded in form. He does not teach, he clarifies. Adariel remains fallen only by definition. In function, he is something entirely different. A witness, a reminder, a warning that knowledge, once integrated, cannot be unlearned, and awareness, once achieved, changes alignment forever. Adariel, the fallen angel of divine physiology and cosmic awareness. In the celestial order, not all angels were created to sing. Some were created to understand. Adariel belonged to this second lineage, not a herald, not a throne guardian, not a voice in the endless choir. He was an observer. Among the earliest structures of the heavens, Adariel was assigned a role few others could fulfill. He studied not the stars, but the framework that allowed stars to exist. Not worlds, but the architecture that held worlds together. He examined the mechanisms of consciousness, the relationship between awareness and form, the way divinity expressed itself through structure. Where other angels reflected glory, Adariel examined design. Adariel's form reflected his function. His physique was dense, deliberate, and stable. Strength without ornament, power without display. Each muscle existed with cohesion. Each wing functioned as an instrument of perception. To Adariel, the body was not a vessel. It was a language, a system through which intelligence moved. Over time, Adariel reached a realization that would later be called dangerous. That awareness does not descend through command, it emerges through comprehension. That obedience deserves order, but understanding transforms it. This distinction marked the beginning of his divergence. Adariel did not rebel. He did not gather followers. He did not challenge authority. He asked questions. Why consciousness was restricted, why angels were forbidden to fully perceive themselves, why knowledge was segmented instead of integrated. In celestial hierarchy, curiosity was tolerated, completion was not. The moment of the fall did not arrive as a punishment, it arrived as awareness. Adariel achieved full integration of his own structure. In understanding himself completely, he crossed a boundary that had never meant to be crossed. Not a boundary of space, a boundary of permission. When Adariel fell, his wings did not burn. They remained intact. This alone set him apart from other fallen figures. His descent was not destruction, it was removal. He no longer fit within the limitations of the system that had created him. On the lower planes, Adariel did not decay. His form stabilized. His awareness expanded. He perceived time not as a sequence, but as a layered presence. He perceived matter not as inert, but as responsive. He did not see himself as fallen. He saw himself as unbound. To humanity, Adariel would later appear as myth, a silent winged figure, powerful, observing, never ruling. He did not tempt, he did not command, he waited. Later traditions struggled to categorize him. Some called him dangerous, others called him corrupt, many called him prideful, and these labels served a purpose. They discouraged imitation, because Adariel represented a truth institutions could not allow, that awareness is not granted, it is developed. In mythic terms, Adariel occupies a liminal role, not a ruler, not a destroyer, not a savior. He is a threshold, the embodiment of the question, what happens when divine beings fully understand themselves? Adariel appears only to those already standing at the edge, to scholars who sense fractures in doctrines, to mystics who feel the limits of belief, to creators who recognize intelligence embedded in form. He does not teach, he clarifies. Adariel remains fallen only by definition. In function, he is something entirely different. A witness, a reminder, a warning that knowledge, once integrated, cannot be unlearned, and awareness, once achieved, changes alignment forever. Njord, Lord of the Quiet Sea. Not a god of thunder, not a god of war, not a god of apocalypse. Njord is a god you feel before you see. He arrives with the wind, not violent wind, the kind that fills sails, the kind that turns a stranded ship into motion, the kind that whispers, go. Njord is a god of the sea, but not the raging sea. He governs the open waters that allow passage. He governs trade routes, safe return, maritime wealth. He is the breath inside the Viking world. Without wind, there is no raids. Without ships, there is no empire. Without safe harbor, there is no survival. Njord is not conquest, he is circulation. He belongs to the Vanir, the older gods of fertility and abundance. Before the warrior gods dominated Norse myth, the Vanir ruled cycles, growth, prosperity. When Aesir and Vanir went to war, the conflict did not end in annihilation. It ended in exchange. Njord was sent to live among the Aesir as a peace hostage. Let's think about this. The god of wealth and wind becomes the bridge between divine families. He was not conquered, he was integrated. And from that moment forward, even the war gods depended on him. Njord is also father of two of the most powerful deities in Norse cosmology, Freyr and Freya. Freyr governs harvest, kingship, and peace. Freya governs love, desire, magic, and even claims half of the honored dead. Njord is the root of the prosperity line. He is the quiet patriarch and the fertility power. He is the most human story in his marriage. Njord marries Skandi, the goddess of winter. She loves the mountains. He loves the sea. They try to compromise. 9 nights by the ocean, 9 nights in the mountains. In the mountains, Njord cannot sleep. The wolves howl. The air is too sharp. But by the sea, Skandi cannot rest. The gulls scream. The waves never stop moving. They part ways, not from hatred, but from elemental incompatibility. Sea and stone, tide and frost. Njord is movement, Skandi is stillness, and stillness cannot hold the tide. Symbolically, Njord represents something rare in Norse mythology: stability without stagnation, prosperity without plunder, movement without chaos. He is not the storm, he is the space between storms. He is a god of flow, and flow is power, and he stands at the edge of Njord at sunrise. Long ships behind him, salt winds lifting silver hair, no lightning, no roar, just tide moving in and out. Njord does not command the sea, he understands it. And in that world obsessed with battle, the quiet sea outlasts the storm. Odin and the eye that would not look away. Now, before the end of all things had a name, before the gods spoke openly about Ragnarok, there was an unease that followed Odin like a shadow. Not fear. Fear implies ignorance. This was something much worse. This was suspicion. Now, Odin ruled as king of the Aesir, seated high in Asgard on the throne, surrounded by warriors, by gods, and by poets who praised his name. But praise rang hollow to him, because Odin knew a truth few dared to admit. A throne does not grant understanding. Power does not grant clarity, and gods, like men, can rule blindly. At night, when the halls grew quiet, Odin would sit in his throne. Hugin and Munin, thought and memories, his crows would return from their flights. They would perch on his shoulders and whisper what they had seen in the 9 realms. Wars brewing, oaths breaking, fates tightening like knots, and each whisper confirmed what Odin already suspected, that something was coming, and worse, that it was already in motion. So Odin turned his attention not outward, but downward, to the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree whose branches held the heavens, and whose roots drank from the places that even gods avoided. One root fed Mimir's well, a well not of water alone, but of memory, of truth, of things remembered by the world itself. It was said that the well remembered every mistake ever made, and every consequence yet to come. And it was guarded by Mimir, not a warrior, not a tyrant, but a keeper, because wisdom does not need force, only patience. Odin traveled alone, no army, no banners, no ceremony, a king who feared witness. When he reached the well, he did not admire it, he did not marvel, he already knew what it was. He asked for a drink. Mimir looked at him, not with reverence, but with recognition, as if he had been waiting. And the price was spoken plainly. One of your eyes. Not your blood, not your crown, not your life. Your eye, the thing with which you interpret the world. And the silence that followed was heavy, because Odin understood the meaning immediately. This was not payment for knowledge, this was proof of intent. To drink from the well was to accept that you would never see the world the same way again. And Odin could have turned back. He would still be king, he would still be worshipped, he would still be feared. Ignorance would have protected him. But Odin did not come for comfort, he came for truth. And truth always takes something with it. So Odin reached up and tore the eye from its socket. No miracle softened the act, no divine numbness dulled the pain. This was not a test. It was mutilation, a god breaking himself on purpose. Blood fell into the well, followed by the eye itself, which sank slowly as if the well were swallowing a memory. Only then did Mimir allow him to drink. And what Odin gained was not peace. He saw the ruins, not the symbols, but as forces that demanded sacrifice to weld. He saw fate not as a suggestion, but as a structure that was already built. He saw Ragnarok not as a distant threat, but as a certainty moving steadily towards him. And worst of all, he understood that knowledge does not grant control. It only removes denial. When Odin rose from the well, he was one-eyed, not wounded, not diminished, but exposed. From that day forward, Odin would never rest. He wandered the realms disguised as an old man, testing warriors, tempting kings, destroying those who proved unworthy. Not out of cruelty, but out of desperation. Because Odin knew something that the others did not. That war was coming whether they wanted it or not. Valhalla was not a reward. It was a recruitment center. In Herja were not heroes. They were resources. And Odin gathered them obsessively. Because wisdom had shown him the end but offered no way out of it. This was the price that Odin paid. Not the loss of an eye, but the loss of illusion. He could see the truth now, and it did not care that he was God. His missing eye did not make him wiser, not the way that poets imagine. It made him haunted, because once you see the shape of fate, you can't argue it. You cannot pray it away. You cannot rule it into submission. You can only depend. And so Odin ruled with authority in one hand and inevitability in the other. One eye looking forward, one eye forever staring up from the depths of the well. A reminder to gods and men alike that wisdom is not enlightenment, it is endurance. And knowledge is not saving, it only ensures that when it comes, you will recognize what you saw. Long ago, when the North forgot how to sleep, the winter arrived quietly. Not the clean snow of stars, but a tired chill, heavy, lingering, very unsettled. Rivers froze in the wrong directions, shadows stayed longer than they should, and fear, left unattended, learned how to walk. But the heavens noticed. They debated, they hesitated. But in the far north, where night is patient, Paktai stood barefoot on the frozen ground. He did not rush, he did not shout. For many winters, Paktai had only done one thing. He had mastered himself. Each breath slowed with the storm within. Each silence sharpened his will. What no longer belonged to him, fear, doubt, hunger for power, fell away and wandered the world, believing itself free. Tonight, Paktai opened his eye. From the quiet sky descended the ancient companions, the turtle, slow and enduring, and the snake, precise and final. They did not coil and threat. They rested. Paktai took up his sword, not in anger, but in clarity, and walked into the shadow beneath the frozen rivers, where restless things had built a kingdom of noise. The darkness expected struggle. It expected fear. Instead, it met stillness. Each step Paktai took returned something to the balance. Each strike unraveled what should have never been. No screams, no chaos, only correction. When the last shadow dissolved, Paktai placed his sword into the earth. The rivers remembered how to flow. The cold softened into winter, not warning, and the north exhaled. From that night on, Paktai was known as Zen Wu, the true warrior, not because he conquered others, but because he never needed to. They say he still walks when the earth grows loud with corruption, not to punish, not to terrify, but to remind things where they belong. And when he passes, even evil finds itself too tired to continue. Rest now. The north is watching, and tonight it is calm. Pakhet, the hunter of the desert, the lioness of the cliffs. There are gods that live in temples with crowds and incense and choirs. And then there are gods who live where human voices don't carry. Packhead is not a goddess of the marketplace. She is not a goddess of polite prayer. Packhead is a lion goddess in the margins, the heat haze between dunes, the shadow tucked under cliff, the quiet tension in the spine that tells a hunter something is watching you back. Some deities come from stories. Packhead comes from presence, and presence is older than any story ever written down. She is known as she who scratches, she who rips, or she who hunts. And she belongs in the edge of Kemet, the place where the Nile can't soften. You can see her in the wide desert bowl under the sun, bleached pale blue, almost white. The sun is so blunt, it doesn't feel like light, it feels like weight. The sand isn't one color. It is layered, gold, amber, clay red, bone dust. And there are stone outcroppings like broken teeth. Cliff faces that look carved by time and sandstone, and old arguments between wind and rock. And somewhere in that cliff wall, cut into the stone itself, there is a place for her. A hollow that is not a cave, not a home, not a tomb. A mouth in the rock where a lion goddess can be fed with offerings and fear and respect. Packhead is a cliff goddess, a goddess you approach the way you approach a lion. Not loud, not fast, not careless. Because if she is present, the desert becomes a hunting ground. Packhead is often associated as being a lioness. Now don't imagine an animal, imagine a divinity wearing animal truth. She is tall in the way that statues are tall, not in height but in authority, the kind of authority that makes the air feel organized around her. Her face is a lioness, clean, calm eyes, a muzzle that suggests restraint, not the grin of a predator playing with prey, more like the stillness of a predator that doesn't need to prove anything. Her skin is a shade of sunburnished bronze or deep umber, like the earth after heat. Not polished, not porcelain, more like living stone warmed by the daylight. Gold catches her cuffs, collar, the geometry of ancient craft. But this isn't decoration, it reads as rank. And her eyes, they are measuring instruments. They measure distance, they measure threat, they measure truth. When she turns her gaze on someone, it doesn't feel like being looked at. It feels like being judged by the wild itself. Packhead is a lion goddess tied to hunting and war, but not in the loud, marching drums way. Her war is precision. Her hunting is law. She is the goddess of the moment before impact, the silence before claws, the breath held, the twitch of muscle under skin. If Sekhmet is the blaze, Packhead is the ember that waits. If Bastet is the hearth cat, the domestic guardian, Packhead is the wildcat that never belonged in your home in the first place. Packhead moves between those polarities like a blade sliding between ribs, soft and inevitable. She is the lioness outside the city order, the divine reminder that civilization is a thin robe worn over the animal truth. She is the goddess who hunts at twilight. Packhead is strongest in the hours that don't belong to anyone, not to noon. Noon is too obvious. Not to midnight. Midnight is too deep. Packhead belongs to twilight, where the desert stops shining and starts listening. At that hour, the horizon bruises purple and burnt orange. The sand cools fast. The air changes texture, like silk turning into smoke. You can imagine her then, a silhouette near the cliff edge, a goddess shaped like a lioness, gold catching the last light like fireflies trapped in metal. Her feet silent on stone, not running, not sneaking, but existing with the confidence of a creature that has never been prey. This is the Packhead myth, the lioness who teaches the world what it feels like to be hunted by the sacred. Packhead's worship is associated with places like Ben Hassan, cliffside zones where tombs and sanctuaries cut in the rock made from the landscape to feel like a library for the dead. And that matters, because a cliff temple isn't a normal temple. A temple in a city says the gods are here with you. A temple in a cliff says the gods are here, you just happen to be allowed near them. The rock is older than your lineage. The desert doesn't care about your name. And the goddess of the cliff is the same way. She is not impressed, she is not bribed, she is not moved by performance. Approaching Paquette is like approaching the ancient truth. You don't negotiate, you align or you get corrected. Paquette's energy is quiet dominance. She is not screaming wrath, she is not chaos. She is controlled force, the kind of force that doesn't waste motion, the kind of force that doesn't argue. In mythic reading, Paquette shows up in a person's life when someone needs to stop begging and start moving with authority. Someone is surrounded by predators and has to become one. Someone is learning that softness without boundaries becomes a meal. Paquette doesn't teach to be cruel, she teaches to be real. She teaches the law of the hunt, which is not evil, it is honest. The desert doesn't apologize for being dry. The lioness doesn't apologize for eating. Paquette is that level of truth. The truth that makes people uncomfortable because it doesn't care how anyone feels about it. Her name is often connected to scratching, and this is the perfect symbolism. A scratch isn't always lethal. A scratch is a message. A scratch says, I could have ended you. I chose education. Paquette's scratch is initiation. It marks a person. It can be literal, claws, blood, pain, or spiritual, ego cut, illusions torn, comfort shredded. Paquette doesn't just kill prey, she kills falsehood. And if someone is living in a lie, Paquette is not the goddess that gently guides them out of it. She is the goddess that rips away the curtain. Paquette in the lioness continuum. It had multiple lion-headed goddesses because lion energy had multiple modes. Paquette is not redundant. She is specialized. She is the lioness of the cliffs and the borderlands, hunting as sacred law, controlled violence, twilight vigilance, the wild feminine that doesn't seek approval. If Sekhmet is divine punishment, Paquette is divine pursuit. And pursuit is scarier. Punishment ends. Pursuit keeps coming. Poseidon, the earth shaker, the ocean king, the power beneath the waves. Now back when there was only blackness as far as the eye could see, there was the sea. When time itself was just beginning to awaken, there was the sea. And beneath that, there was him. Poseidon was never gentle water. He is pressure, depth, impact, the force that reminds humanity that it does not own the world. Birth of a god. He is born to Kronos and Rhea, children of the Titans, heir to a brutal cosmic dynasty. Like his siblings, he was swallowed by Kronos, imprisoned in darkness, silenced before he could even speak. But fate cracks open the tyrant. Freed by his brother Zeus, Poseidon joins the rebellion, the Titanarchy, a war not of armies, but of existence itself. When the Titans fall, the cosmos is divided. Zeus claims the sky. Hades takes the underworld. Poseidon draws the sea. Not as consolation prize, as a kingdom. The dominion of the deep. The Greeks do not see the ocean as peaceful. They saw it as unpredictable, generous one day, devouring the next. Poseidon commands the storm surge, the tidal fury, drowning silence, and the trembling of the earth itself. He is called Earth Shaker. When the ground splits beneath cities, that is not geology. That is a god striking the floor of reality with his trident. He creates horses from sea foam, wild, muscular, unstoppable creatures. Even his gifts are force incarnate. The contest for Athens. Power must be tested. When the city of Athens seeks a patron, Poseidon answers, and so does Athena. Poseidon strikes the rock of Acropolis with his trident. A spring bursts forth. Power, salt, sea strength. Athena plants an olive tree. Sustainability, civilization, strategy. The city chooses her, and Poseidon does not forget. The ocean around Greece never lets them forget either. The Trojan War. During the war at Troy, Poseidon does not sit neutral. He sides with the Trojans. He stirs waves to protect Greek fleets. He shakes battlefields. He reminds mortals that gods are not mascots. They are forces. Even the might of the heroes bends when he intervenes. Wrath against Odysseus. But his most personal fury is reserved for one man. Odysseus blinds his son, the Cyclops Polyphemus. The sea becomes a prison. For 10 years Poseidon hunts him. Storm after storm, shipwreck after shipwreck, island after island. Not random misfortune, divine pursuit. Poseidon does not rage quickly. He endures, and so does his anger. He represents civilization's dependence on nature, the illusion of control, the power beneath structure, the reminder that stability rests on something wild. He is not evil, he is elemental. The Mediterranean did not belong to Greece. Greece survived because Poseidon allowed it. When ships vanish, when coastal lines tremble, when the seas roar without warning, the Greeks do not blame chance. They look to the horizon, and they see a king beneath the waves, and his trident is never far from the surface. Bringer of breath, civilizer of worlds. Now the wind does not announce itself. It moves first, unseen, shaping what follows. Across the ancient lands of Mesoamerica, there existed a presence whose power was not measured by conquest, but by continuity. A force that did not rule through terror, but through order. An intelligence that shaped civilizations without demanding their submission. They call this presence Quetzalcoatl, known as the feathered serpent, a being where sky and earth converge in one, where motion is governed by restraint, where creation begins not with command, but with breath. He was not worshipped as a tyrant. He was remembered as a guide. Now, Quetzalcoatl was never a single image, nor a single role. He moved through cultures and centuries under many names, each reflecting a function rather than a disguise. As Quetzalcoatl, he was the feathered serpent, the union of earthbound life and celestial motion. Feathers representing the sky, scales representing the ground, neither being dominant, both being necessary. As Ihikatl, he was the wind itself, invisible, essential, life-giving, the breath that animates the world, clears stagnation, and carries sacred speech from one age to the next. Among the Maya, he was remembered as Kukulkan, an echo rather than imitation, proof that his influence traveled farther than borders and endured longer than empires. These were not separate gods. These were aspects of the same civilizing force. His role as the civilizer. Quetzalcoatl did not create humanity to rule it. He prepared humanity to survive. He is credited with bringing maize from the mountains where it is hidden and transforming this sustenance into civilization. He established calendars so time itself could be measured, remembered, and anticipated. He gave humanity sacred speech, language not only for command, but for teaching, for prayer, and for recording. As Ihikatl, the wind, he moved the sun across the sky so the world would not stagnate in darkness. Breath, motion, rhythm. These were his domains. Where other gods demanded sacrifice to prove loyalty, Quetzalcoatl emphasized balance. Order was not enforced, it was simply taught. The descent into Mexiclan. When the world stood empty of humanity, Quetzalcoatl descended into Mexiclan, the realm of the dead, where the remains of previous ages lay guarded by these lords of death. Now these bones were not relics, they were potentials, and the rulers of Mexiclan did not yield them willingly. They tested Quetzalcoatl with impossible trials, attempting to entrap him in his failure. And in the struggle, he stumbled, and the bones shattered. Creation itself, it seemed to have failed again. But Quetzalcoatl did not retreat. He gathered the broken remains and spilled his own divine blood upon them. From sacrifice, not dominance, humanity emerged. Imperfect, fragile, and varied. Human beings were not forged as flawless instruments. They were born of loss and intention. And this imperfection was not a flaw, it was the point. The Age of Order. In later ages, Quetzalcoatl walked among humanity as ruler priest, remembered as Tolpitzin Quetzalcoatl, presiding over the city of Tula. His rule was defined not by expansion, but by refinement. Human sacrifice was rejected, arts and learning flourished, craftsmanship, astronomy, and ritual knowledge became the foundations of society. Under this guidance, civilization advanced without descending into cruelty, and this was rare, and rarity often brings attention. Where Quetzalcoatl represented restraint and continuity, Tezcatlipoca embodied conflict, reflection, and disruption. He did not confront Quetzalcoatl with armies, he confronted him with a mirror, and in that mirror, Quetzalcoatl saw not a god, but a flawed being, aging, mortal, capable of error. Temptation followed, sacred boundaries blurred. The myth does not dwell on indulgence, it dwells on consequence. Quetzalcoatl recognized that he had fallen short of his own principles, and instead of doubling down on authority, he chose removal. Exile and transformation. Quetzalcoatl did not cling to power, he left. Some traditions say he walked eastward towards the sea. Others say he burned himself on a pyre. The details differ, but the meaning remains constant. He refused to rule dishonestly. The myth of Savitri and Yama, when devotion outwalks death. Now in Indic mythology, Yama is the god of death. This is the first mortal to die and the first to discover what lies beyond life. He does not rule death through terror or conquest, but through precedent. He knows the path because he walked it first. He is not a demon lurking in darkness. He is a judge, a keeper of order, a figure of calm authority. He rides a buffalo, carries a noose not as a weapon, but as a symbol of inevitability, and presides over the passage every soul must eventually take. Yama is not evil. He is not cruel. He is law. In Indic thought, death is not a villain to be slain. It is a function, precise, inevitable, and impartial. Yama does not take pleasure in death, nor does he rush it. He enforces it because the universe requires balance, and balance requires ending. And Savitri does not challenge that. She does accept that. She early on made a choice with clear open eyes. Now, it must be said that Savitri is a mortal woman. She is not a goddess in disguise, not a heroine born to destiny, just a human, raised with discipline, clarity, and uncommon depth of mind. She's known for her devotion, her intelligence, and her ability to listen more than she speaks. When the time comes to choose a husband, she does not wait for fate to deliver it. She goes out into the world and chooses a man, Satyavan. Their meeting is simple. There's no divine spectacle, only recognition. But before the marriage, a seer warns her of what is to come. Satyavan is fated to die within a year, and this knowledge is precise. There is no ambiguity, there is no hope of error. Savitri does not ask the prophecy to be undone. She does not look for another man. Savitri chooses her husband knowing his fate is to die within this year. Not because she believes that fate can be tricked, not because she expects divine intervention. She chooses him anyway. And this matters because devotion chosen with full knowledge of loss is not desperation. It is resolve. And as prophecy had foretold, the time of Tiamat's death arrives. There is no chaos in this moment, no omen in the sky. Life simply reaches its appointed edge. And Yama comes soon after, as he always does. He is tall and composed, dark as shadow, but solid as law. He rides no storm and carries no fury. In his hand is a noose, not as a weapon, but simply a symbol of completion. His presence does not frighten by force, it silences by certainty. He is truly the specter of death. There is no drama, no cruelty, and no hesitation. Yama takes Tiamat's soul and turns to leave, carrying it towards its destined place. And Savitri does something that no one expects. As she grieves, as she watches death walk away with her husband, she does the only thing left for her to do. She follows. Not to fight, not to beg. She simply walks beside death. Yama moves along his path as he always had. It is not a road of fire or torment, but a narrowing of the world itself. The sounds of life thin out. What remains is quiet, steady, irreversible. This is not punishment, it is simply transition. And then he notices her, a living woman walking beside him. Not stumbling, not dragging her feet, simply keeping pace. And Yama stops. He turns, his voice is calm without threat or anger. This is not your place, he tells her. The living do not follow the dead. Savitri does not argue, she does not plead, she does not even reach for her husband. She bows her head slightly and speaks, not to challenge death, but to address law. You are Yama, she says, keeper of order, guardian of what must be. You did not take without reason, and you did not act without duty. And Yama listens. Tell me, Savitri asks, what is righteousness, if not the faithful carrying out one's role? And what is duty, if not walking the path one has chosen without deviation? And as he turns, she walks again without speaking. A wife who abandons her husband at the edge of death has fulfilled her duty. A law that does not answer truth, can it still be called just? Savitri does not accuse, she does not demand, she simply asks. And because Yama is law, he must answer. And this is the power of measured speech. Yama listens as Savitri finishes speaking, and for a long moment the path is silent. Then the god of the dead answers, not with a rebuke, but with retribution. Your words are aligned with Dharma, he says. You have spoken without deceit, without fear, and without demand. And it is fitting that such clarity should be acknowledged. Yama turns towards her. Ask me a boon, he says, one that does not concern the life that I have taken. And Savitri bows her head. May my father regain his sight, she says, that he may see the world clearly once again. Yama inclines his head. Granted. They continue walking, and after some time, Yama speaks again. Ask another boon. Savitri answers softly. May my lineage endure and prosper, guided by righteousness and balance. Yama does not hesitate. Granted. They walk on. The silence stretches, and the world grows thinner still. And then Yama speaks for the third time. Ask again. Savitri lifts her eyes. May I bear children with my husband, she says, and may our union be long and whole. Yama speaks the words as he had done previously. Granted. And only then does the law complete its circuit. Yama stills. For the first time, death pauses. Not in error, not in anger, but in understanding. A boon granted by law cannot contradict itself, and so without spectacle, without protest, Yama turns back. And with him, the path responds. The narrowing of the world eases, the weight of the air lightens, sound, long absent, begins to return. Not all at once, but gently. The hush of death gives way to the faint rustle of the wind, the distant echoes of the birds, and the soft persistence of life continuing. Color seeps back into the world, not suddenly, but naturally. The shadows lose their grip. The ground beneath their feet feels solid again. The threshold between worlds recedes, sealing itself without ceremony. And Yama releases the soul that he carries. Setyavin breathes. Life returns to him, not as a miracle, but as a correction. Law fulfilled, not undone. He opens his eyes and rises, steady and whole. Savitri does not cry out. She does not collapse. She simply moves to his side and walks with him, as she always had. Behind them, the path closes. Yama does not linger. He does not watch. The work here is finished, and he has other tasks to complete. And this is a true victory. Savitri does not defeat death. She does not break its rules. She does not demand exception. She understands the law so completely that it must honor her. Yama keeps his word. The boon stands. The order of the universe remains intact. No violence, no rebellion, no illusion of immortality, just precision. And this is why Savitri's story endures, because she proves that devotion, when guided by clarity, does not need to fight death. It only needs to walk with it, until death, bound by its own truth, must turn back. And as we have seen, Hades administers death. Hell accepts death. Osiris structures it. Izanami warns us not to cross its boundary, and Savitri teaches something even more rare. If you understand death deeply enough, you don't need to fight it at all. Sometimes the cleanest victory is the one where no one bleeds and the laws remain intact. The Daughters of Mara. The final trial for the Buddha as he sat beneath the Bodhi tree. Now, these three daughters all worked in the domains of seduction, disruption, and emotional manipulation. And their most famous target was, of course, Siddhartha Gautama. Their mission was tied to their father's force. He had already tried storms, demons, armies of fear, and none of them had moved him. So he sent something that was far more precise, and these were his daughters. Because no warrior is undefeated until he has defeated himself. Now he sent first Tanha, who was thirst, and she was not aggressive, she was not loud. She becomes everything Siddhartha ever loved. She is comfort, memory, the warmth of the palace that he had left behind. She reminds him of what it is to have pleasure without shame. She whispers of reunion. She offers relief from the severity of awakening. And her weapon is longing. But the Siddhartha Buddha does not react to this. He watches the feeling rise and pass, and Tanha fades away. And then there is Raga, who is the flame. And Raga does not whisper, she burns. She dances before him with this radiant beauty. She shifts form. She is youthful, divine, cosmic. She magnifies sensation. She tries to awaken not memory, but hunger. She is passion without restraint. She is attachment disguised as devotion. But Siddhartha sees the chain hidden inside of her embrace. He does not recoil. He does not engage. He remains still. And Raga cannot bind what does not grasp. So she dissolves. Then comes Arati, who is discontent, and she does not seduce. She mocks. What are you doing here? This is pointless. You are wasting your life. She attacks discipline itself. She sends boredom, restlessness, irritation, doubt. The quiet voice that sabotages commitment. But Siddhartha does not argue with her. He does not defend himself. He remains still. And without reaction, Arati has no fuel. And she disappears. When all the three fail, their father demands proof of witness. And Siddhartha touches the earth, and the ground itself bears witness. And at that moment, Mara and his daughters lose their hold. Not because they are destroyed, but because they are all understood. Pele, goddess of fire, creation, and jealousy. Before the islands had names, before stone remembered the shape of mountains, before land dared to rise above the sea, there was only movement. The ocean whirled endlessly, dark and conscious, and within it traveled a force that refused stillness. Her name was Pele. She was not born in one place. She emerged again and again, from flame, from hunger, from the deep furnace of the world. Pele was fire with intention. Her hair flowed like smoke caught in the wind, black and endless, carrying embers in its wake. Her skin glowed as if lit from within, sometimes warm as sunlit stone, sometimes red hot with fury. Her eyes were not gentle. They burned with the knowing of something older than fear. Where Pele walked, the earth opened. She carried fire not as destruction, but as becoming. Lava spilled from her footsteps, slow and unstoppable, reshaping the world without apology. The sea hissed when she approached, retreating from her heat, recoiling from her will. But Pele was not alone in the world. Beneath the waves, where light dies and pressure rules, dwelled her sister, Namaka. Namaka was the ocean given thought. Her skin shimmered like moonlight on black water. Her hair moved as currents move, slow, heavy, inexorable. Her eyes were deep, ancient, and cold with memory as only the sea could have. Where Pele burned with emotion, Namaka endured with patience. She ruled the deep places, the trenches, the crushing silence, where nothing escapes gravity or consequence. And she resented her sister. When Pele arrived, the sea was pushed back. Where fire rose, water was displaced. Each new land Pele created was a wound in Namaka's domain. To Namaka, Pele was reckless, too loud, too hungry, too disruptive. To Pele, Namaka was suffocating, a force that drowned passion, swallowed movement, and demanded stillness. They were not enemies born of hatred. They were sisters born of opposition. Fire that must move, water that must contain. When Pele first settled, she believed she could build a home. She dug into the earth, carving chambers for her flame, shaping mountains from molten stone. She believed the land would hold her. But Namaka would not allow it. With crashing waves and rising tides, Namaka answered. She flooded Pele's home, cooled her lava, shattered her growing islands, and dragged them back into the sea. Storms followed Pele wherever she lingered too long. Island after island, Pele was driven away. Each retreat hardened her. Each loss sharpened her jealousy, not of her sister's power, but of her sister's stability. Namaka already had a kingdom. The ocean accepted her without resistance. Pele had to fight for every inch of ground. And still, she moved forward. She crossed the sea again and again, chased by waves, hunted by storms, carrying her fire across the dark. What humans would later call volcanoes are the scars of this journey, places where Pele tried to stay and was forced to flee. And then at last, she reached Hawaii, the youngest island, the strongest spine of the stone. Here, the earth did not break beneath her. It answered. Pele dug deep, deeper than she ever had before. She struck the mantle of the world itself, tapping into the planet's heart. Fire surged upward and stayed. Namaka became, again, furious. Waves slammed against the stone, storms tore at the land, but this time the land endured. Fire and water clashed, not to destroy each other, but to define their boundaries. And Pele remained. She claimed the volcano as her body and the island as her spine. She did not rule from the sea or the sky, she ruled from beneath. The people felt her presence in trembling ground, in glowing rivers of lava, in the fertile soil that followed destruction. Pele was not cruel, but she was emotional. She loved fiercely. And when she loved, she gave warmth, growth, and abundance. Forests returned when the lava had cooled. Life sprang that appeared to be dead. The people learned to honor her, to respect her fire, to speak her name with care. Because Pele was also jealous. When she was disrespected, when love was betrayed, when humans forgot the land was alive, her anger rose. Lava flowed without mercy, villages vanished beneath molten stone. It was not punishment, it was correction. Pele did not destroy out of hatred. She destroyed because stagnation is a lie. Fire clears what no longer serves, and creation requires sacrifice. Namaka watched from the deep, no longer chasing her sister, but never forgiving her. The ocean still presses against the land, testing it, reminding Pele that nothing remains unchallenged forever. They are still bound. Fire rises, water answers. The world is shaped between them. Even now, Pele sleeps beneath the islands. Not gone, not silent, but waiting. Because fire never truly rests. The origin of the five sons. Now this myth belongs to the Mexica people, often called the Aztecs, and these people understood time not as a straight path, but as a turning wheel. To them, the world did not begin once, nor was it destined to end only once. Creation was an act that could be repeated. Destruction was not a failure of the gods, but a condition of existence. And in this tradition, the world is sustained through balance, and balance is never permanent. When forces fall out of alignment, when power grows too rigid, when knowledge spreads beyond containment, or when the earth itself just grows weary, the age that holds the world comes to an end. What follows is not emptiness, but renewal. The Mexica called each age a sun. A sun is not only the light in the sky, it is the order by which life is arranged. It governs how people live, how the gods rule, and how the earth responds to both. Each sun carries its own laws, its own expectations, and its own failures. Now, according to this cosmology, 4 suns rose and fell before this present age. Each was shaped by a different ruling force, and each ended when the force could no longer sustain the world it had made. These endings were not sudden accidents. They were the natural conclusion of imbalance left uncorrected. Now, the passing of a sun does not mean the death of everything. Life changes form. Memory does not entirely vanish. Traces remain in the land, in the sky, and in the people who come after. And for this reason, the present world is not separate from those that came before it. It is built upon their remains. Now, the current age is known as the 5th age, the sun of movement. It endures not because it is strong, but because it is fed. Its motion is constant, its ground uncertain. Unlike the worlds before it, this sun survives only through continuous offerings, binding the fate of the gods and humanity together in a form of dependence. The 5 suns are not merely stories of the past. They explain why the earth moves, why catastrophe returns in cycles, and why stability must be earned again and again. To understand the suns is to understand that the world is not guaranteed. It is held together by effort, sacrifice, and restraint, and it can be unmade. What follows is the account of those suns, the worlds that rose, the forces that rule them, and the ways in each one came to its own end. The first sun, the age of strength. Now in this world the earth was firm and unyielding, and the sky hung low, as if watching what walked beneath it. The people of the first sun were tall and powerful, shaped in the image of the force that ruled them. Their limbs were heavy with muscle, their voices carried far across the plains, and their heart did not know hesitation. Now this sun was governed by Tezcatlipoca, the lord of the smoky mirror, whose power lay in dominance and reflection. Under his rule, strength was the highest virtue. To overcome another was proof of worth. To stand unchallenged was to be favored by the gods. The people learned early that this world they belonged to could all be taken away from them. They built no delicate cities, for delicacy was for the weak. Their dwellings were thick-walled and low to the ground. Their tools were heavy, their weapons simple and brutal. What matters was not beauty, but endurance. What mattered was not harmony, but victory. In the first sun, order was maintained through fear. Those who rose to power held it by force, and those beneath them learned obedience through pain. The gods did not intervene to soften the world. They rewarded conquest and silence. Mercy was not taught, and restraint was not admired. The earth at first endured. The forest grew dense and dark. The mountains stood unbroken. Rivers cut their paths without resistance. Life was abundant, but it learned to hide. Creatures of claw and fang thrived, mirroring the nature of the people themselves. The world reflected what ruled it. Over time, the people of the first sun forgot the difference between strength and excess. To dominate was no longer enough. They sought to dominate everything. They hunted not for need, but for proof. They fought not for survival, but for sport. The weak were not protected, and the fallen were never remembered. The gods watched, and the mirror, Lipoca, darkened. The balance that sustained the sun began to strain. Strength unchecked turned inward. The people no longer listened to the earth, nor to the warnings carried by the wind. They believed the world existed to endure them. Then the jaguars came. They did not arrive as an invasion, nor as a punishment announced from the sky. They emerged from the forest, from the mountains, from places where the world itself remembered itself. Silent and patient, they moved as the earth moves, without anger and without haste. The jaguars were not beasts alone. They were the return of the world's will. Where the people struck hardest, the jaguar struck back. Where strength had been worshipped, strength was answered. Villages fell without warning. Paths once claimed by men were reclaimed by claw and shadow. The night grew longer and the ground drank deeply. The people fought as they had always fought. They raised their weapons. They stood their ground. They believed that force could save them. It did not. For the jaguars did not tire. They did not seek glory. They did not rule. They corrected. One by one, the strong were taken. The cries of conquest gave way to silence. The earth closed over what remained. The forest thickened. The mountains stood as they had before. The sky lifted, indifferent. And so the first sun ended. Not in fire, not in blood, but in teeth and shadow. When the jaguars were through, the world was empty of those who had ruled it. Strength alone had proven insufficient to sustain creation. The earth rested, and the gods turned away from what had been made. From the remains of that age, something memory buried in muscle and bone, a warning carried forth into the next world, that strength without restraint will always devour itself. The second sun, the age of wind. The second sun rose in a world that moved. Where the first sun had heavily pressed upon the earth, this new age loosened its grip. The sky lifted higher. The air grew restless. Winds crossed the lands freely, carrying seeds, voices, and memory from one place to another. The world no longer held still. This sun was governed by Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, whose nature was creation, breath, and renewal. Under his guidance, life was shaped not by force, but by movement. Change was welcome. Travel was praised. To remain in one place for too long was to resist the nature of the world. The people of the second sun were lighter of body and quicker of thought. They spoke many languages, and none belonged to them for long. Names shifted with age, borders were not fixed, knowledge passed easily from one mind to another, carried on like the wind with pollen. They learned to read the sky. Clouds were signals, breezes were messages. The movement of birds revealed paths yet unseen. The people followed these currents, settling briefly before moving on. Their dwellings were temporary, their cities flexible. Nothing was built to last forever because nothing was meant to. In this age, the gods did not rule through fear. They ruled through inspiration. The people were encouraged to learn, to question, and to seek beyond the horizon. Songs traveled farther than armies ever had. Ideas crossed distances faster than any foot could carry them. And for a time, the balance held. But movement left unchecked does not rest. As the people learned more, they began to outpace the gods who guided them. They discovered patterns in the wind that they had not been taught. They followed currents that led beyond paths the gods had laid out. They asked questions that did not return to their makers. The world grew wide and thin. Communities scattered, lineages burned, memories fractured into many versions of itself. What one group knew, another reshaped. Truth became fluid. The gods found it harder to gather the people's attention, harder to anchor belief in one single form. Quetzalcoatl watched as his creation shifted. The wind that once connected all things began to separate them. Without stillness, there could be no center. Without a center, the world could not hold. The signs appeared quietly. Winds shifted without patterns. Storms crossed paths and tore at one another. The sky spoke in voices that contradicted themselves. The people felt it, but did not stop. The movement had become their nature. Then the wind rose. Not a single storm, but an unraveling. Currents pulled against one another. The air thickened and twisted. The ground itself seemed uncertain, which was always going forward. The people were lifted, scattered, and changed. Some were carried so far that they were never seen again. Some were transformed by the force of the wind, reshaped into beings of air and motion. Some simply vanished, absorbed into the endless sky. There was no battle, no moment of resistance. The second sun did not fall, it just dispersed. When the winds were settled, the world was quiet and vast. The past, once traced by feet and memory, had been erased. The land remained, but it was empty of those who roamed it. Quetzalcoatl withdrew, carrying with him the knowledge that freedom without grounding dissolves its own foundation. From the second sun remained a lesson carried forth unseen, that movement must be balanced with return, and that knowledge uncontained would scatter a world beyond recovery. The third sun, the age of fire. The third sun rose in brilliance. Light filled the world in ways it had never done before. The sky burned clear and high, and the day stretched long and bright. Where the second sun had scattered, this age gathered. Heat brought focus, fire brought purpose. The world sharpened itself. This sun was governed by Tiamat, Lord of rain and fire, whose power lay in release and restraint of energy. Under his domain, the forces of nature were no longer distant or mysterious. They were observed, measured, and invoked. The people of the third sun learned to command fire. At first, they used it to shape their world gently. Fire hardened clay and strengthened tools. It brought light to the night and warmth to the cold. With it, the people built cities that endured and rituals that bound them together. The world grew ordered and efficient. But fire teaches quickly. Soon the people learned not only to tend fire, but to draw power from the heavens themselves. They read the sun's movements, the heat of the earth, hidden force within stone and storm. Rituals grew precise. Offerings became calculations. Knowledge was recorded and refined. And this was an age of mastery. Now these people believed understanding granted permission. Each discovery led to another. Each boundary crossed revealed a new source of strength. The gods watched as people reached, pulling energy into forms it was never intended to last. The world glowed. Cities shone against the horizon, alive with light, even after the sun had set. The night no longer belonged to the stars. Fire had claimed it. The people celebrated their control, believing themselves aligned with forces that shape creation. But fire does not forget its own nature. As power accumulated, restraint diminished. What began as harmony shifted towards excess. Rituals demanded greater energy. Structures required constant feeding. The people no longer asked whether something should be done, only whether it could be. And the earth began to strain. The skies darkened with heat. The air grew heavy. Rain fell unevenly, either absent or overwhelming. The signs were visible, but dismissed. The third sun had taught people to trust in power, and power had not yet failed them. Then fire returned from above. The sky opened, and the flame fell upon the world like judgment without voice. Not a single blaze, but many. Burning rain that struck cities and fields alike. The structures that had drawn so much energy became conduits for destruction. Stone cracked. Metal warped. The light that had once illuminated the night consumed it instead. The people fled, but there was no refuge. Fire traveled faster than thought. What had been mastered now ruled. The world burned with force it had been taught to release. There was no correction, only consumption. When the flames at last faded, the land was blackened and silent. The cities were reduced to ash. The knowledge that had once seemed eternal had vanished like smoke. The third sun ended in brightness too intense to endure. From its ruin remained a warning carried into the next age, that power without restraint accelerates its own end, and that mastery mistaken for wisdom invites destruction from the very forces it commands. The fourth sun, the age of water. The fourth sun rose into a world that mourned. After the burning of the third world, the earth cooled and softened. Ash settled in the soil, scars filled with water, the sky diminished, and the clouds gathered low, holding their weight. This was an age shaped not by conquest or mastery, but by memory. This sun was governed by Ka-Chi-Ut-Li-Kwan, she of the jade skirt, whose power lay in water both life-giving and sorrowful. Under her influence, the world learned to feel again. Rivers widened, lakes deepened, rain returned in steady rhythm. Life emerged cautiously, nurtured by gentle forces. The people of the first sun were bound together by kinship and care. They lived close to the water, listening to its movements and honoring its patience. Stories were preserved. Loss was remembered. The pain of earlier worlds was not hidden, but carried forward. This was an age of deep connection. Communities gathered not for strength or expansion, but for belonging. The people learned to read each other's faces, to sense sorrow before it was spoken. Bonds grew thick and enduring. The world felt intimate, woven together by shared experience. For a time, this balance held, but memory, like water, accumulates. Grief was not released, it was held, shared, and returned again and again. The people mourned not only their own losses, but for the losses of the world itself. Every river carried remembrance. Every raindrop recalled what had been burned and scattered before, and the weight grew. The gods watched as emotion filled every space. Compassion turned inward, becoming heaviness. The people slowed. Movement became effort. Even joy carried the echo of sorrow. Ka-Chi-Ut-Li-Kwan wept. Her tears were not punishment, they were simply response. The rains grew longer. Rivers spilled their banks. The land drank deeply, then too deeply. Fields softened. Paths vanished. The boundaries between water and earth blurred and then dissolved. Still, the people did not flee. They stayed together. They held one another as the waters rose. The flood did not strike suddenly. It came as an unending presence. Day after day, the world submerged itself in remembrance. Homes disappeared beneath quiet currents. Hills became islands. Voices softened and then faded. Some of the people were changed by the water. Their forms adapted, their lives continuing beneath the surface. Others dissolved into the current, becoming part of the world they loved too deeply to leave. There was no violence in the end, only immersion. When the waters finally receded, the land was reshaped. Valleys had shifted, shorelines had moved. The sky reflected itself endlessly in pools left behind. The fourth sun had not been destroyed, it had been absorbed. From this age remained a truth carried forward. That feeling without release becomes weight. That memory without movement becomes drowning. And that even love, unbalanced, can dissolve the world it seeks to hold. The fifth sun, the age of movement. The fifth sun rose in a world that did not trust itself. The land still carried the marks of fire and water. Ash lay beneath the soil. Rivers remembered old paths. Nothing seemed settled. The earth shifted often, as if testing its own way. This was a world aware of its past endings. The world was governed by Tonatiuh, the sun in motion, whose power was not creation or destruction, but endurance. Under his rule, the world did not seek perfection. It sought continuation. The people of the fifth sun learned early that stability was not given. It was maintained. The ground trembled without warning. The sky darkened and cleared again. Seasons changed sharply. Life persisted, never comfortably. To live in this world was to adapt constantly. From this awareness arose ritual. The people observed the movement of the sun across the sky and understand that it did not travel freely. Each day was an effort. Each rising required energy. The world itself demanded participation, so offerings were made. At first, they were simple: food, breath, time. Actions of attention meant to support the sun's journey. But as the generations passed, the demands grew clearer and heavier. The sun did not move on attention alone. It required fuel. Blood became the currency of continuation, not as cruelty, but as necessity. Life fed life. Motion was sustained by sacrifice. The people did not believe themselves punished, they believed themselves responsible. The gods no longer ruled with certainty. They had learned from the previous suns. Strength had failed, freedom had scattered, power had consumed, and love had drowned. The fifth sun was built on awareness of limitation, and yet fear lingered. The rituals became more precise, the calendars tightened. Time itself was measured and guarded. The people learned to live within cycles, marking days not as progress, but as survival. The world endured because it was watched, but still cracks appeared. Earthquakes shook cities without warning. The ground opened and closed like a living thing. The people understood these signs not as anger, but as strain. Movement, unceasing, wore the world thin. The fifth sun did not promise an end. It promised continuation until it cannot continue. Its fate is not sealed by a single force, but by imbalance return. This sun teaches that survival demands participation, that motion requires cost, and that the world remains only as long as its people live beneath it, knowing what came before them. They build, they remember, they offer. And the sun continues its path across the sky, not because it is eternal, but because it is not yet stopped. Reflection of the suns. The five suns are not remembered as separate worlds, they are layered. Each age left its trace upon the earth and within those who follow. Strength hardened bone, wind loosened thought, fire sharpened desire, water deepened feeling, movement taught endurance. Nothing was entirely lost. The present world stands on the remains of those that came before it. The land remembers, the sky remembers, even the body remembers, though it no longer knows why. The five suns reveal that creation is not a single act, but a condition repeatedly tested. Each world rose according to a ruling force, and each fell when that force exceeded its place. Balance was never permanent, it had to be held, corrected, and restored again and again. The gods learned this slowly. They learned that power alone could not sustain a world, that freedom without return dissolved its center, that mastery burned itself hollow, that love without release submerged all things, and that survival demanded participation from all who lived beneath the sky. The fifth sun endures because it remembers the failures of the others. Yet remembrance is not immunity. The earth still moves. The sun still strains across its path, The rituals continue not because they are sacred, but because they are necessary. The world does not persist by promise or destiny. It persists by effort. And this is the knowledge carried by the five sons. That no world is guaranteed, that stability is temporary, that continuation requires restraint. The cycle does not threaten, it instructs. As long as balance is held, the sons remain. When it is not, the world will change again. Not as punishment, not as judgment, but as it always has been. The Shape of Death, a myth reading. Before death had a name, it had no face. There was no figure waiting in the dark, no voice calling from beyond, no blade raised in judgment. There was only absence. The earliest humans did not imagine death as an enemy. They experienced it as an event, as a sudden cold, as inevitable as night. A body stopped moving. A fire went out. A voice was never heard again. Death did not arrive, it happened. And because it had no intention, it inspired no image. As civilizations formed, something changed. When humans learned to build cities, they also learned to remember. And memory demanded explanation. If life had meaning, then its ending had to as well. So death became a place before it became a person, a realm, a crossing, a river, a shadowed road. In many early traditions, death was gentle, not merciful, but calm. It came like sleep. It came like dusk. The dead were not punished, they were processed, guided, measured, prepared. Death was not here to hurt you, it was there to receive you. But the world grew crowded. Empires expanded, wars multiplied, famine followed power wherever it went. And death stopped feeling distant. It moved into homes, into streets, into churches. When people began dying by the thousands, death could no longer be abstract. It needed a face. The turning point came when death became visible, not as a myth, but a spectacle. Plague emptied cities. Fields filled with bodies instead of crops. Entire generations vanished between seasons. And suddenly, death was no longer rare. It was constant. When something becomes constant, humans stop asking if and start asking when. And when fear demands explanation, authority provides answers. This is when death learned to judge. The end of life was no longer neutral. It was deserved. It was earned. Avoided if you obeyed. The dead were no longer simply gone, they were sorted, saved or condemned, accepted or judged, and judgment requires a judge. So humanity dressed death, not in flesh but in symbol, a skeleton, because beneath every difference, all humans look the same. A robe, because authority hides itself, because power never shows its hand. And a blade, not a sword of war, but a tool of harvest, the scythe. Because death does not fight you, it collects you. The Grim Reaper did not appear all at once. It assembled, piece by piece, century by century. Artists painted what people feared. Priests preached what people needed to hear. And death stepped forward, not as an idea, but as a presence. Tall, silent, watching. It did not rage, it did not plead, it waited. And this figure was not born from ancient scripture. It was born from trauma, from watching neighbors vanish overnight, from mass graveyards blessed in a hurry, from doorbells ringing so often they lost meaning. The Grim Reaper is not death itself. It is humanity's attempt to look death in the eye. And once death had a face, it could be spoken to, appealed to, mocked, or feared. Stories emerged of death being tricked, outrun, delayed. Not because humans believed they could win, but because they needed to imagine resistance. Even in myth, death always wins, but sometimes it listens. As centuries passed, the Grim Reaper followed humanity forward, into books, into theater, into art, then into films, then into comics, then into jokes. Because when something terrifies you long enough, eventually you laugh. Not because it is funny, but because laughter is controlled. Thoth, god of cosmic structure, language, and recorded reality. Thoth is not a god who rules through force. He does not conquer, he does not command armies, he does not demand worship through fear. Thoth governs something far more dangerous. He governs understanding. In Kemetic thought, the universe does not function because it's powerful. It functions because it is ordered, because it can be measured, because it can be named, because it can be remembered. And Thoth is the intelligence that makes that possible. Now, Thoth is known by many names, each reflecting a different aspect of his function. In Kemet, he is Jehudi, a name tied to intelligence, speech, and precision. He is called Lord of Divine Words, he who reckons time, and scribe of the gods. To the Greeks, he becomes Hermes, and later Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great mind. In esoteric traditions, he is not treated as a personality at all, but as a principle of intelligence. Sometimes he appears with the head of an ibis bird, sometimes as a baboon. These are not aesthetic choices. The ibis represents calculation, balance, and precision. The baboon represents observation, memory, and lunar rhythm. Thoth's forms are not symbolic masks, they are functional avatars. Now, this is what Thoth actually governs. Thoth does not create the universe. He does not destroy it. He does not rule it. He makes it legible. Thoth governs language as a creative force, writing as memory made permanent, mathematics as cosmic truth, time as a measurable system, law as recorded balance. In Kemetic cosmology, chaos is not defeated by violence, it is stabilized by Ma'at, the principle of truth and balance. And Thoth is Ma'at's recorder. He does not decide what is true, he ensures that truth is accurately accounted for, and that distinction matters. Thoth and the structure of reality. In myth, Thoth is often present during moments of dispute among gods. When Horus and Set battle for kingship, Thoth mediates. When divine law must be clarified, Thoth records. When order must be restored, Thoth calculates. He is not neutral because he is indifferent. He is neutral because structure must be impartial. Reality does not care who you are, only whether balance is maintained. Thoth embodies that principle. Now, the weighing of the heart ceremony. One of Thoth's most important roles appears in the judgment of the dead. When a soul enters the hall of Ma'at, the heart is weighed against the feather of truth. Anubis conducts the ritual. Osiris presides, but Thoth records the outcome. He does not judge the soul, he does not punish it, he does not save it. He ensures the process is correct. In this moment, Thoth represents the idea that justice is not emotional, it is procedural. Cosmic awareness is not mercy or cruelty, it is accuracy. Language is power. Now, to understand Thoth, we must understand how ancient cultures viewed language. Words were not labels, they were forces. To know the true name of a thing was to have power over it. To write something was to make it real beyond the moment. Thoth is the god of that threshold. Speech becomes spell. Writing becomes law. Memory becomes continuity. This is why Thoth is associated with magic, not illusion, but as applied knowledge. Magic is simply understanding reality well enough to manipulate it. And his influence beyond Kemet. Thoth does not remain confined to Kemet. Through cultural contact, he becomes Hermes. Through Hermeticism, he becomes the universal mind. Through alchemy, he becomes the architect of transformation. Through philosophy, he becomes intellect itself. By the time he appears as Hermes Trismegistus, Thoth is no longer just a god. He is the idea that consciousness can understand the universe it inhabits, and that idea survives every empire. The Book of Thoth. Now, Thoth's most famous relic is not a weapon or a crown. It is fittingly a book. And the Book of Thoth represents total knowledge, language that can command nature, words that can bend reality. Myth warns that those who read it without wisdom lose themselves, not because knowledge is evil, but because unprepared awareness destabilizes identity. This is a recurring pattern in Thoth mythology. Knowledge is dangerous, but power without structure destroys the holder. This is why Thoth is not a king. Thoth never rules a kingdom. This is not an omission, it is a statement. Kings come and go. Structures remain. Thoth does not sit on a throne because reality itself sits on his function. Empires collapse, languages die, but mathematics persist. Law persists. Memory persists. And thus, so does Thoth. In modern thinking, Thoth appears as the architect of intellect, the symbol of recorded reality, the reminder that understanding carries responsibility. He is not faith, he is not belief, he is the mechanism between both. Thoth does not ask to be worshipped, he asks only to be understood. He stands where knowledge becomes permanent, where speech shapes reality, where truth is measured instead of declared. As long as humans seek to understand the universe rather than to dominate it, Thoth remains present, not as a ruler, but as the mind that keeps the universe legible. Tiamat, the first mother of monsters. Before there were gods with names, before temples, before prayers, before fear knew how to kneel, there was Tiamat. Not born, not created, not crowned. She was. She was the saltwater ocean before shorelines existed, the dark womb before light learned how to speak, the roar beneath creation, where nothing had yet decided what it wanted to be. Tiamat was not evil. She was not kind. She was unfiltered existence. In the beginning, there was only mingling. Fresh water and salt. Apsu and Tiamat. Stillness and motion folding into one another. From this union came the younger gods. Loud, restless, impatient. They shouted inside the silence. They stirred the waters. They forgot that they were guests inside a body older than time. And the old gods began to ache. Apsu wanted silence back. He planned destruction not out of cruelty, but out of exhaustion. The young gods killed him first. They struck the quiet father down, and the waters trembled. Tiamat felt it, not as grief alone, but as betrayal. Creation had turned on its source. Something ancient woke up in her depths. Not rage, not vengeance. Correction. The sea does not scream when it floods a city. It simply returns things to where they belong. Tiamat did not declare war. She responded. She gave birth again. This time, not to gods who would forget her. This time she birthed monsters. Serpents with venom instead of prayers. Dragons with eyes like eclipses. Creatures shaped by fear itself. Not because she loved chaos, but because chaos was truth before order learned how to lie. A consort forged for war, and the heavens shook. The younger gods panicked. They had learned how to rule, but not how to face their mother. They searched for a weapon. They searched for a hero. They chose Marduk. Not because he was the oldest, not because he was the wisest, but because he promised control. Marduk did not face Tiamat as a son. He faced her as a system. He brought nets to trap the infinite winds, to suffocate the ocean. Words to define what should never have been named. And when he struck her down, creation didn't cheer, it split. From her body, the world was built. Her ribs became the sky. Her blood became the rivers. Her bones became the foundation of order. Civilization rose on a corpse, and all the gods called it victory. But listen closely. Chaos was never destroyed. It was never dissected. Tiamat did not vanish. She was repurposed. Every storm that ignores your prayers, every flood that erases borders, every moment where systems collapse under their own arrogance, that is her breath moving through the cracks. Tiamat is not a villain. She is the reminder that order is temporary, that control is borrowed, that creation always comes from something older, darker, and deeper than comfort allows. She is the mother civilization buried alive, and she is still dreaming. The gods fear chaos because it reminds them of what they were before they learned how to rule, that they were simply aspects of the universe, no greater or lesser than any other creation. The Vega Chorus, the hidden civilization of the Fae. There is a system in the northern sky that most humans mistake for simply a star. Vega. Bright, steady, harmless. But Vega is not a star alone. Vega is a civilization. And not the kind that builds empires. The kind that builds coherence. Long before the Aesir divided dominion, long before angels learned hierarchy, long before humans named gods and prayed upward, Vega was already synchronized. The Fae are not tribes. They are not rival courts. They are not scattered fantasy creatures fluttering in forests. They are one civilization, a distributed mind wearing different bodies. Individual excellence inside collective intelligence. They do not rule each other, they resonate. At the heart of Vega is something no empire understands. The chorus. Not a monarch, not a throne, not a god. The chorus is a shared cognitive field, a living psychic lattice. It stores memory, intent, invention, cultural law. Every Fae can access it, but not equally. To speak with one Fae is not to speak with an individual. You are speaking with a civilization through a particular mouthpiece. Privacy exists, secrecy exists, but deception barely does. When a Fae lies, the chorus vibrates. When a Fae fractures the whole, the field trembles. Dissent does not cause war, it causes desynchronization. And desynchronization is treated like a disease, not punished, healed, because coherence is survival. That is why Vega has never collapsed. It cannot fracture in the way empires fracture. It does not vote, it resonates. And from that resonance arise four great expressions of consciousness. Not species, expressions. The first are the elves, the aesthetic cortex of Vega. They decide how reality should feel. They shape ecosystems like musicians tune instruments. They sculpt genetics like artists shape marble. They control light, symmetry, emotional resonance. For them, beauty is not vanity, beauty is organization. A forest that is balanced is beautiful. A form that is efficient is beautiful. Ugliness is inefficiency. Inefficiency is danger. The elves design worlds that do not decay prematurely. They decide the elegance of probability. They do not ask whether something is pleasing, they ask whether it harmonizes. And if it does not harmonize, they redesign it. Where the elves determine how realities look, The dwarves determine what reality can survive. And this is structural cortex, reality engineers, star metal forgers. They understand the weight of physics the way others understand breath. Jewels in Vega are not decoration, they are memory. Crystal lattices store data, compression through structure. A dwarven city does not collapse because collapse is not permitted. They bend law without breaking it. They bind vaults that hold time steady. They forge metals that remember who touched them. They calculate load, tension, strain, not with numbers alone, but with harmonic awareness. If the elves are beauty, the dwarves are endurance. And then there are the gnomes, the cognitive cortex, the dangerous ones among them. Where others see doors, gnomes see coordinates. They were the first to understand that realms are not mystical mysteries. They are addressable locations. Portals are not opened, they are called. A gnome does not ask, where do we go? They ask, what frequency are we dialing? Their portals operate on symbol, on intent, on harmonic mathematics, on narrative destiny. Every realm vibrates at a signature. Every world carries a pattern. To dial incorrectly is to not fail. It is to arrive somewhere you cannot survive. Humans imagine glowing arcs, spinning circles, ritual incantations. The gnomes use indexing systems, dimensional mathematics, resonant coordinates. They do not tear space, they pursue it. And that is why Vega is feared, not because it conquers, but because it understands access. No empire can dominate a civilization that cannot be divided. The Aesir built hierarchy, the Vega build coherence. Hierarchies require obedience, coherence requires alignment. You cannot bribe resonance, you cannot threaten harmony, you cannot infiltrate a mind that is already shared. That is why Vega has never needed armies. When an external force approaches, the chorus adjusts. Light shifts, probabilities bend, portals close. Not all by decree, but by synchronization. And yet, Vega is not perfect. Individual excellence still exists. The chorus amplifies brilliance, but it also magnifies deviation. When a Fae drifts too far away from harmonic law, the field hums. Correction begins. Not through exile, through recalibration. That is the subtle terror outsiders feel. That you are not confronting a ruler, you are confronting a civilization that cannot lie to itself. And now, the human problem. Humans are loud, emotionally erratic, narratively dense. We fracture easily, we divide quickly, we deceive others daily, and yet we are curious. When humans discover portal mathematics, when they uncover harmonic fragments, when they initiate symbols without understanding densities, they attempt to dial blindly. What frequency are we disturbing? And that is how civilizations collide, not through invasion, through curiosity without coherence. Vega does not seek Earth. It does not seek conquest. But if a door is dialed, if frequencies align, if narrative density breaches threshold, the chorus will answer. Not with war, but with evaluation. If Earth is dissonant, if humanity cannot harmonize, Vega will not destroy, it will simply refuse resonance. And a world without resonance collapses under its own fragmentation. Remember this, they are not fantasies, they are structure. They are synchronization. They are a civilization that does not fracture. And in the cosmos ruled by hierarchy and conquest, that may be the most dangerous power of all. When you look at the Vega in the night sky, you are not looking at a star. You are looking at coherence, listening, waiting for someone to dial correctly. Wadjet, the flame on the brow of kings. Before crowns were forged, before thrones were carved from stone, before kings learned how to speak like gods, power already had a guardian. In the marshlands of the Delta, where water hides its depth and reed whispers secrets older than language, Wadjet watched. She did not rule a city. She did not demand temples. She did not walk among the people. She waited. The gods knew chaos does not always arrive as war. Sometimes it comes as doubt. Sometimes as betrayal. sometimes as a ruler who forgets why he was chosen. And when the world needed authority that could not be questioned, they did not send a storm, they did not send an army, they sent a warning. From the papyrus marsh the cobra rose, not to strike, but to be seen. Wadjet coiled herself into fire and gold, her body becoming the living sigil of sovereignty. She climbed the crown of the king, not as decoration, but as a contract. Rule in balance, she whispered, without sound or burn. From that day forward, no true king stood alone. When enemies crept through shadows, Wadjet's eyes opened. When traitors smiled too easily, her hood flared. When foreign kings tested the borders of Kemet, they felt heat on their faces before steel ever touched their skin. She did not chase invaders across deserts. She did not roar like Sekhmet. She did not judge like Anubis. She simply ended threats. Quickly, precisely, without ceremony. Pharaohs learned this truth early. The crown was not theirs. The throne was not theirs. Even the land was borrowed. What belonged to them was the responsibility of being worthy of the cobra. For when a ruler spoke falsely, Wadjet tightened. When the ruler ruled for himself, she leaned forward. And when a ruler forgot Ma'at entirely, forgot balance, forgot duty, forgot the people, the flame on the brow burned hot enough to be the last thing his enemies never saw. Thus Wadjet endured, not in stories told to children, but in silent warnings to kings, not as a goddess who walked the earth, but as a presence that ended reigns. Even now, long after crowns have turned dust, her symbol remains, a reminder. Power is never safe, authority is never passive, and true sovereignty always comes with a blade already drawn. Wadjet still watches, and she never misses. Melina, the Inuit sun goddess who refused to be caught. Now, the Arctic is not empty. It only looks empty to people who've never had to survive in a world where the sky can erase you. Up here, silence is language, wind is warning, and light is not decoration. Light is a verdict. Because in the far north, the sun doesn't simply rise, it returns, like something that had left on purpose, like someone who remembers why they ran. And her name, whispered through the ice, through stories, through generations, is Melina, the Inuit sun goddess, North America's burning eye. So picture this, a tundra horizon so wide it feels like the edge of the world. Snow drifts like plain dunes, dark rock teeth jut from the land, and above it all, a sky that doesn't behave like other skies. A sky where the sun can refuse to set, or disappear for weeks. A sky that makes time feel like an animal, restless, hungry, unpredictable. In that world, you don't worship the sun because it's pretty, you respect it because it decides if you live. And Melina is that decision. Melina, the woman who became daylight. Melina isn't portrayed as a distant glowing ball. She is a woman, a being with presence, with hair like night wind, with skin kissed by cold and sun alike, with eyes that carry the weight of the horizon. She wears the Arctic the way royalty wears a crown, not for fashion, but for survival. And around her, whether you imagine her in traditional adornments or in mythic cinematic armor made of hide, bone, and sunlight, there is always the same feeling. She is not gentle. She is not the soft warmth of spring morning. She is the harsh truth of daylight, the kind that exposes tracks in snow, the kind that reveals what someone tried to hide, the kind that turns secrets in the shadows that have nowhere to go. The beginning. Before the sky, there was a house. In one of the most famous Inuit tellings, Melina begins not in the heavens, but on earth. She lived with her brother. His name was Ananigan, often described as the moon. And in some versions, another sister exists too, a presence in the household, another point on the triangle of family and faith. But the core is always the same. Melina is there. Ananga is there. A home exists. And like many mythic homes, it is not safe because it has walls. Sometimes the first danger in a mythology is not the monster outside, it is the betrayal inside. The violation when trust breaks. There is a night, and the night is thick. No stars you can count, no lamp strong enough to banish what's about to happen. Melina's brother violates her, and in some telling, she comes into her darkness and does not know who until the truth is uncovered. And when the truth becomes clear, when the betrayal reveals its face, something fundamental snaps. Not just in Melina, in the world. Because in the Inuit myth, the cosmos isn't mechanical, it's emotional, a moral universe, a relationship universe. And when an act like that happens, the world does not shrug and move on. It transforms. The torch. Flight becomes fire. Melina does not stay. She takes a torch, a fire in hand, and she runs. Not into the woods, not into another village. She runs into the sky. And as she rises, her torch becomes brighter, hotter, purer, until it is no longer just a fire. It is the sun itself. And it is the first blazing refusal, the first celestial no. And behind her, Ananigan follows. He is frantic, hungry, ashamed, possessed by a pursuit. He grabs his own flame, and his light becomes the moon, not as radiant, not as triumphant, a lesser fire, a chasing fire. The chase, why the sun and the moon move. Now the sky makes sense, not because science is wrong, but because the myth is describing something else. Not the physics of motion, but the meaning of motion. The sun and the moon cross the heavens, not as random objects, but as story. Melina runs ahead, unreachable, sovereign, burning. Ananigan follows, always behind, never arriving. And in many tales, the moon grows thin, weak, diminished, because he forgets to eat. Because obsession is a kind of starvation. That is why the moon waxes and wanes. Sometimes he regains strength. Sometimes he fades. But he never stops chasing. And Melina never stops moving. Because the first rule of her myth is she will not be caught again. The Arctic miracle. When day doesn't end. And here's where the Inuit sky becomes legend. Because in the far north, the sun can hang above the horizon for days, weeks, months. A long golden endurance. A daylight that refuses to die. This is not a cute fun fact. This is Melina's personality written across the atmosphere. When Melina decides to stay, she stays. When she leaves completely. And then she returns. You feel it in your bone. Because for the communities living in the Arctic, the returning sun is not just nice weather. It is a spiritual event. It is cosmic reunion. A promise that the world hasn't abandoned you. Melina's power. Light as witness. But here's the thing most people miss about Melina. Her power isn't just heat. It's exposure. Light reveals. Light tracks movement. Light turns footprints into evidence. Light makes the hunter visible. Light makes the hunted see the land. Melina becomes the witness of the sky. And here's the harsh truth to that. Because of her story, the sun isn't a smiling mother. It's a survivor. A living boundary. A force that says, I will not disappear for your comfort. I will not soften the truth. I will shine until you can't pretend anymore. The cosmic archetype. The solar feminine who escapes. A lot of cultures imagine the sun as male. A king, a warrior, a father. a creator seated on a throne of fire. But Melina is a different archetype. She is the solar feminine as escape and sovereignty. She is the feminine divinity not defined by who she belongs to, but who she refuses. She is a goddess who doesn't negotiate with violation. She doesn't argue, she doesn't plead, she moves. And in moving, she becomes untouchable. In moving, she becomes the sky's dominant rhythm. Now, imagine Melina as she would appear in the cinematic myth. She walks across a bridge of snow and ice. Behind her, the sun blooms like a halo, too bright to stare at. Wind pulls her hair like black smoke. Her silhouette is sharp against the gold. She doesn't smile as a friendly deity, but she moves forward, always forward. Each step is a reminder that this is a goddess not begging for worship. This is a goddess whose existence is proof of survival. So when the sun stretches over the Arctic, when it refuses to set, when it stares down at the frozen land like an unblinking eye, remember this: it is not just daytime. It is Melina, still running, still sovereign, still refusing to be caught. And in the world where people have tried to rewrite what happened, erase what happened, hide what happened, Melina becomes something sacred, a light that will not let the story disappear, because her myth teaches a hard truth carved in the sky. Sometimes the only way to survive is to become untouchable. Sometimes the only way forward is to turn your escape into a new cosmos. And the sun is not always kindness. Sometimes the sun is a woman with a torch and a vow. Echidna, the cosmic mother of monsters. Now, Echidna is not called herself a monster, but she is the mother of them. Her name in Greek means viper, Echidna, and this word carries venom. It is ancient, coiled, and is patient. She does not belong to the generation of Olympian gods. She does not sit in marble halls. She does not command lightning or law. She belongs to something much older. Now, most traditions name her as the daughter of Phorcyrus and Ceto, ancient sea deities, beings well formed in the earliest layers of mythic existence. And other traditions go deeper still. They claim she was born of Gaia, the earth itself, and Tartarus, the abyss beneath the foundations. And if that lineage is accepted, then Echidna is not simply born into the world, she emerges from its structure. She is earth and depth combined. She is soil and void. She is surface and underworld. And her form reflects that duality. From the waist up, she is woman, beautiful, aware, composed. From the waist down, she is serpent, scaled, coiled, eternal. And this is not a curse. It is a declaration. The upper form represents consciousness. The lower form represents instinct. The serpent is older than temples, older than kings, older than writing itself. And across cultures, the serpent represents regeneration, tonic power, and the pulse of life that moves beneath the visible world. Echidna is not stitched together from parts. She is a whole. She is the seam between civilization and wilderness. She dwells in a cave, far from cities, far from Olympus. Ancient sources place her in the wild regions of Scylla. She does not seek attention. She does not seek conquest. She inhabits the margins, and from the margins she births power. Her giant, the great storm giant who once rose against Zeus. Typhon embodies violent chaos, wind, fire, upheaval. Echidna embodies generative chaos. Together they form a bloodline that predates order and survives beyond it. They do not seek to rule Olympus. They produce what challenges it. This is where Echidna reveals her true cosmic role. She is called the mother of monsters, but that phrase is much smaller than her actual being. She birthed Cerberus, the three-headed guardian of the underworld gates. She births the Hydra, the regenerative serpent that multiplies when wounded. She birthed the chimera, the fusion of lion, goat, and serpent, a living contradiction of categories. She birthed Otherus, the twin-headed guardian beast. In some traditions, she births the Sphinx, the riddle keeper who tests gods. These are not mindless horrors. They are thresholds. They stand at borders. They guard gateways. They demand transformation. Each one of her children forces confrontation. Each one requires growth. Each one stands between humanity and its next stage. Echidna does not birth destruction without design. She births resistance. Without resistance, there is no evolution. Without danger, there is no courage. Without monsters, there is no hero. Her existence reveals a deeper mythic law. The universe does not grow through comfort, it grows through tension. Echidna is the womb of that tension. She is primordial earth, refusing to be domesticated. She is chaos bloodline woven into the fabric of reality. Even the Olympians cannot erase her impact. Now, some later traditions claim she was slain by Argus Pantopus, the many-eyed giant servant of Hera, while she slept. Now, symbolically, this represents surveillance, destroying wild fertility, order suppressing the abyss. Yet, even in that version, her offspring remain. Her legacy persists. Her bloodline continues. You cannot eliminate the mother principle of resistance. You can only attempt to manage its expression. Echidna represents the archetype of the Dark Mother. Not evil, not malicious, but always necessary. The Dark Mother births the forces that compel transformation. She ensures that stagnation is impossible. She ensures that power must justify itself. She ensures that every kingdom must confront what it fears. Civilization defines itself by the monsters it overcomes, but someone must give birth to those monsters. That someone is Echidna. She is not chaos in motion, she is chaos as inheritance. She is the reminder that beneath every structure lies something older, something coiled, something fertile, something waiting. Echidna is not a footnote in heroic myth. She is the hidden foundation, primordial earth, chaos bloodline, mother of thresholds. And without her, there would be no trials, no transformation, and no legends at all. Adiriel, the fallen angel of divine physiology and cosmic awareness. In the celestial order, not all angels were created to sing. Some were created to understand. Adiriel belonged to this second lineage. Not a herald, not a throne guardian, not a voice in the endless choir. He was an observer. Among the earliest structures of the heavens, Adiriel was assigned a role few others could fulfill. He studied not the stars, but the framework that allowed stars to exist. Not worlds, but the architecture that held worlds together. He examined the mechanisms of consciousness, the relationship between awareness and form, the way divinity expressed itself through structure. Where other angels reflected glory, Aduriel examined design. Aduriel's form reflected his function. His physique was dense, deliberate, and stable. Strength without ornament, power without display. Each muscle existed with cohesion. Each wing functioned as an instrument of perception. To Adiriel, the body was not a vessel. It was a language, a system through which intelligence moved. Over time, Adiriel reached a realization that would later be called dangerous. That awareness does not descend through command, it emerges through comprehension. That obedience deserves order, but understanding transforms it. This distinction marked the beginning of his divergence. Adiriel did not rebel. He did not gather followers. He did not challenge authority. He asked questions. why consciousness was restricted, why angels were forbidden to fully perceive themselves, why knowledge was segmented instead of integrated. In celestial hierarchy, curiosity was tolerated, completion was not. The moment of the fall did not arrive as a punishment, it arrived as awareness. Adariel achieved full integration of his own structure. In understanding himself completely, he crossed a boundary that had never meant to be crossed. Not a boundary of space, a boundary of permission. When Adariel fell, his wings did not burn. They remained intact. This alone set him apart from other fallen figures. His descent was not destruction, it was removal. He no longer fit within the limitations of the system that had created him. On the lower planes, Adariel did not decay. His form stabilized. His awareness expanded. He perceived time not as a sequence, but as a layered presence. He perceived matter not as inert, but as responsive. He did not see himself as fallen. He saw himself as unbound. To humanity, Adariel would later appear as myth, a silent winged figure, powerful, observing, never ruling. He did not tempt, he did not command, he waited. Later traditions struggled to categorize him. Some called him dangerous, others called him corrupt, many called him prideful, and these labels served a purpose. They discouraged imitation, because Adariel represented a truth institutions could not allow, that awareness is not granted, it is developed. In mythic terms, Adariel occupies a liminal role, not a ruler, not a destroyer, not a savior. He is a threshold, the embodiment of the question, what happens when divine beings fully understand themselves? Adariel appears only to those already standing at the edge, to scholars who sense fractures in doctrines, to mystics who feel the limits of belief, to creators who recognize intelligence embedded in form. He does not teach, he clarifies. Adariel remains fallen only by definition. In function, he is something entirely different. A witness, a reminder, a warning that knowledge, once integrated, cannot be unlearned, and awareness, once achieved, changes alignment forever. Njord, Lord of the Quiet Sea. Not a god of thunder, not a god of war, not a god of apocalypse. Njord is a god you feel before you see. He arrives with the wind, not violent wind, the kind that fills sails, the kind that turns a stranded ship into motion, the kind that whispers, go. Njord is a god of the sea, but not the raging sea. He governs the open waters that allow passage. He governs trade routes, safe return, maritime wealth. He is the breath inside the Viking world. Without wind, there is no raids. Without ships, there is no empire. Without safe harbor, there is no survival. Njord is not conquest, he is circulation. He belongs to the Vanir, the older gods of fertility and abundance. Before the warrior gods dominated Norse myth, the Vanir ruled cycles, growth, prosperity. When Aesir and Vanir went to war, the conflict did not end in annihilation. It ended in exchange. Njord was sent to live among the Aesir as a peace hostage. Let's think about this. The god of wealth and wind becomes the bridge between divine families. He was not conquered, he was integrated. And from that moment forward, even the war gods depended on him. Njord is also father of two of the most powerful deities in Norse cosmology, Freyr and Freya. Freyr governs harvest, kingship, and peace. Freya governs love, desire, magic, and even claims half of the honored dead. Njord is the root of the prosperity line. He is the quiet patriarch and the fertility power. He is the most human story in his marriage. Njord marries Skandi, the goddess of winter. She loves the mountains. He loves the sea. They try to compromise. 9 nights by the ocean, 9 nights in the mountains. In the mountains, Njord cannot sleep. The wolves howl. The air is too sharp. But by the sea, Skandi cannot rest. The gulls scream. The waves never stop moving. They part ways, not from hatred, but from elemental incompatibility. Sea and stone, tide and frost. Njord is movement. Skandi is stillness, and stillness cannot hold the tide. Symbolically, Njord represents something rare in Norse mythology. Stability without stagnation. Prosperity without plunder. Movement without chaos. He is not the storm, he is the space between storms. He is a god of flow, and flow is power. And he stands at the edge of Njord at sunrise. Long ships behind him, salt winds lifting silver hair. No lightning, no roar, just tide moving in and out. Njord does not command the sea, he understands it. And in that world obsessed with battle, the quiet sea outlasts the storm. Odin and the eye that would not look away. Now, before the end of all things had a name, before the gods spoke openly about Ragnarok, there was an unease that followed Odin like a shadow. Not fear. Fear implies ignorance. This was something much worse. This was suspicion. Now, Odin ruled as king of the Aesir, seated high in Asgard on the throne, surrounded by warriors, by gods, and by poets who praised his name. But praise rang hollow to him, because Odin knew a truth few dared to admit. A throne does not grant understanding. Power does not grant clarity, and gods, like men, can rule blindly. At night, when the halls grew quiet, Odin would sit in his throne. Hugin and Munin, thought and memories, his crows would return from their flights. They would perch on his shoulders and whisper what they had seen in the 9 realms. Wars brewing, oaths breaking, fates tightening like knots, and each whisper confirmed what Odin already suspected, that something was coming, and worse, that it was already in motion. So Odin turned his attention not outward, but downward, to the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree whose branches held the heavens, and whose roots drank from the places that even gods avoided. One root fed Mimir's well, a well not of water alone, but of memory, of truth, of things remembered by the world itself. It was said that the well remembered every mistake ever made, and every consequence yet to come. And it was guarded by Mimir, not a warrior, not a tyrant, but a keeper, because wisdom does not need force, only patience. Odin traveled alone, no army, no banners, no ceremony, a king who feared witness. When he reached the well, he did not admire it, he did not marvel, he already knew what it was. He asked for a drink. Mimir looked at him, not with reverence, but with recognition, as if he had been waiting. And the price was spoken plainly. One of your eyes. Not your blood, not your crown, not your life. Your eye, the thing with which you interpret the world. And the silence that followed was heavy, because Odin understood the meaning immediately. This was not payment for knowledge, this was proof of intent. To drink from the well was to accept that you would never see the world the same way again. And Odin could have turned back. He would still be king, he would still be worshipped, he would still be feared. Ignorance would have protected him. But Odin did not come for comfort, he came for truth. And truth always takes something with it. So Odin reached up and tore the eye from its socket. No miracle softened the act, no divine numbness dulled the pain. This was not a test. It was mutilation, a god breaking himself on purpose. Blood fell into the well, followed by the eye itself, which sank slowly as if the well were swallowing a memory. Only then did Mimir allow him to drink. And what Odin gained was not peace. He saw the ruins, not the symbols, but as forces that demanded sacrifice to Weld. He saw fate, not as a suggestion, but as a structure that was already built. He saw Ragnarok, not as a distant threat, but as a certainty moving steadily towards him. And worst of all, he understood that knowledge does not grant. Long ago, when the North forgot how to sleep, the winter arrived quietly. Not the clean snow of stars, but a tired chill, heavy, lingering, very unsettled. Rivers froze in the wrong directions, shadows stayed longer than they should, and fear, left unattended, learned how to walk. But the heavens noticed. They debated, they hesitated. But in the far north, where night is patient, Paktai stood barefoot on the frozen ground. He did not rush, he did not shout. For many winters, Paktai had only done one thing. He had mastered himself. Each breath slowed with the storm within. Each silence sharpened his will. What no longer belonged to him, fear,